This is the late edition of Island 8 News. The late report is compiled from the major networks and wire services as well as local information offices. The local weather forecast is a courtesy of Detachment 8, 30th Weather Squadron.
And good evening. How many governments do we have in this country? That question came today on Iranian television from Foreign Minister Zadek Ghosbadeh as he continued his verbal battle with the militants at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. It still has not been decided who will have custody of the American hostages, the militants or the government. Today, the Foreign Minister gave the militants 24 hours to choose whether to turn the captives over to the government custody and whether to let the hostages meet the UN commission that's in Iran investigating the deposed Shah. The militants say they'd go along with transferring the responsibility for the hostages, but on their terms. They say that before a transfer can take place, Iranian radio must broadcast details of the transfer plan 8 hours ahead of time. They demand Ghosbadeh be removed as the Revolutionary Council's emissary to them, and they want to stay in the embassy. Ghosbadeh has said that the council would decide on how to stage the transfer of the hostages. He also criticized the militants for allowing foreigners, but not members of the ruling Revolutionary Council, to see the hostages, and he also raised questions about how the Americans are being treated. About 24 people, including the U.S. ambassador to Colombia, remain the hostages of guerrillas who hold the Dominican Republic's embassy in Bogota. Colombia's president says he wants the crisis brought to a bloodless end, but he would not say if he'd meet a key guerrilla demand, release of 311 alleged political prisoners. Colombian police were out in force today as municipal and state elections were held. The presidential news office says one woman suffered minor burns when bombs exploded at one polling place in Bogota. Oil industry analyst Dan Lundberg says the rise in the price of gasoline may slow a little bit this month. In fact, he says prices may even go down a bit because there's more supply than demand. Lundberg, who publishes the weekly Lundberg letter, says world crude oil supplies are up, and he says that if supplies of gas continue to outpace the demand, the stage would be set for a test of whether motorists are willing to conserve or want to use as much gas as they can get. Senator Edward Kennedy took his campaign for the Democratic presidential nomination to Illinois this past weekend. The polls show that Kennedy is far behind President Carter prior to next week's primary. Today, Kennedy said in a broadcast interview that the state of the economy is emerging as the key issue in the campaign. Tomorrow, he speaks to miners in the state capital, Springfield. But recently, the senator went to the heart of the civil rights country in search of black votes. Speaking in Montgomery, Alabama, Kennedy hit hard on economic issues. ABC's James Walker has this report.
Once upon a time, a Kennedy candidacy meant automatic support of black voters, but not now. Missing from the welcoming committee was this man, Birmingham Mayor Richard Arrington. He's in Carter's camp, bringing with him other influential black officials. That's why Senator Kennedy made this stop in Montgomery to try to give his sagging campaign here a boost by seeking the support of this group of Baptist ministers. Kennedy reminded them of his brothers and his own commitment to the civil rights movement. He criticized President Carter for the rising unemployment, inflation, and high interest rates, which he noted strikes hardest at blacks. Later, at George Washington Carver High School, he added national health insurance to the list.
And I have a commitment to decent quality health care for the people of this nation. The simple truth is, to be black in America is dangerous to your health.
Kennedy's visit here received an emotional boost from Congressman Walter Fauntleroy, who, after inviting everyone to support the senator, suddenly burst into song, a song that some believe mirrors Kennedy's chances here against the president.
To reach the unreachable star.
James Walker, ABC News, with the Kennedy campaign in Montgomery.
For John Connally, it's all over, but for Ronald Reagan and George Bush, the battle for the Republican presidential nomination is heating up. There are 3 primaries on tap on Wednesday. John Connally's big push in the South Carolina Republican primary did not pay off. Ronald Reagan won with 54% of the vote, gaining all 25 delegates to the national convention. Connally's second place 30% won him not a single South Carolina delegate. Bush had 15% of the vote. So today, Connally threw in the towel. The former Texas governor said Reagan is still the champion. Florida, Georgia, and Alabama hold primaries on Wednesday, and Reagan's leading opponent is George Bush. Reagan is expected to win in all 3 states. In Florida, the Miami Herald shows 39% of Republicans support Reagan and 27% back Bush. Reagan, campaigning in Florida today, appealed to the Cuban-American vote. He said the Carter administration has harassed anti-Castro activists in the Miami area. Bush has been saying that he's the candidate with momentum and the one who can beat Reagan. But losses on Wednesday would dim his hopes, and they may help propel former President Gerald Ford into the race as the Reagan alternative. Bush, who was Ford's CIA director, has passed his old boss the word of staying out of the race. Says Bush, my deep personal conviction is that the American people are not interested in any rerun of the 1976 election. But what do the people think? An ABC News Lou Harris poll says Ford would beat President Carter if the 1980 vote were held today. The percentages, 54% for Ford to 44% for President Carter. But the poll also shows a Reagan-Carter race would end in a Carter victory, 58% to 40%. With a look at recent stock market action, here's ABC's Bill Owen.
Monday was one of the slowest trading days since early January as oil stocks tumbled along with most other issues, and the Dow Jones dropped nearly 9 points. On Tuesday, oil stocks came to light but failed to rouse the rest of the market. Most stocks were down again Wednesday, but trading was heavier. On Thursday, stocks were moderately lower amidst rumors of credit controls. Friday, most big banks raised their prime lending rate to a record 16 3/4%. But the market rallied to finish the week up almost 9 points at 863.14. Bill Owen, ABC News.
Top economic experts in the Carter administration are working on a new anti-inflation strategy. An administration source says the chairman of Carter's Council of Economic Advisors, Charles Schultz, and Treasury Secretary Miller met with congressional leaders over the weekend to discuss the strategy. The source says Carter is likely to outline the plan later this week, even before all of its details are in place, to show financial leaders that he means business on fighting inflation. Among his reported goals, a balanced budget and restraints on consumer spending. The source says a big problem is finding agreement on budget areas to cut. On another economic issue, energy, the House is moving toward a final vote late this week on the oil windfall profits tax. Next week, it could be the Senate's turn. House aides say it appears the objections of oil state representatives would be overruled and the measure will pass. Senator Sam Nunn says he and 7 other senators will introduce a bill tomorrow to put the Internal Revenue Service back in the forefront of fighting organized crime. The Georgia Democrat says restrictions on disclosing information enacted in 1976 means the IRS has to concentrate on those he called waitresses, babysitters, and beauticians instead of underworld figures. Dunn is supporting a measure to give other agencies access to data, such as bank records gathered by the Internal Revenue Service. Sports comes your way next after this message.